Kerberos delegation enables a session to hop between multiple hosts in multi-tier applications when an application needs access to remote resources, such as files or databases, hosted on a backend server. We configure delegation for a specific user or in combination with impersonation for authenticated users. We are going to discuss Kerberos delegation for authenticated users. Delegation can be restricted to specific services for strict access control. Originally, unconstrained delegation was used for cross-domain delegation, as constrained delegation doesn't work between domains. But starting with Windows 2012 Server, resource-based constrained delegation can be used instead. Here is the authentication process flow for a user accessing multi-tier application hosted across App1 web server and DB1 database server. Access to data on DB1 database server was granted to user 1, so we need user 1 to get access token for DB1 database server. So first, user 1 logs in, gets a TGT, and requests and receives a service ticket for a website on App1 web server. Then user 1 and App1 service authenticate each other, and user 1 gets access to App1 website. ASP.NET impersonation was enabled for the website, and the App1 service account was configured to impersonate authenticated users. So the App1 service account will run the user's 1 session under user 1 security context. Next, through the existing web browser session, the user requests access to data on DB1. As App1 service account was configured to process authentication requests for DB1 database service on behalf of authenticated users, it requests and receives a service ticket for DB1 on behalf of user 1. Here is the service for user to proxy request recorded in Network Monitor. And finally, App1 service account presents the user's service ticket to DB1, which then creates access token for user 1. There are 3 types of Kerberos delegation: unconstrained, constrained, and resource-based constrained delegation. Unconstrained delegation enforces Kerberos authentication end-to-end, but it allows the configured service account to access any resource on the network on behalf of another user. A user accessing a service configured for unconstrained delegation stores its TGT and the associated TGT session key inside a service ticket and forwards these to the mid-tier service, which then requests service tickets on behalf of the user for any service on the network without any restrictions. Before Windows 2012 Server, it was the only option for cross-domain delegation. It's enabled by default for domain controller computer objects, and Microsoft doesn't support reconfiguring domain controllers to constrained delegation. If the mid-tier service account gets compromised, the end user's TGT can be used for getting unauthorized access to any network resource for which the impersonated user has access. This is why unconstrained delegation should never be used. An attacker can use the compromised service account to harvest end users' TGTs. If a privileged user with delegation attribute enabled interacts with the compromised service account, it can lead to the compromise of the entire domain. When the delegate server has the client's forwarded TGT and the TGS session key, it can request from the KDC directly any service tickets it needs for any services. The client doesn't need to be involved. With the client's forwarded TGT, the delegate server can fully impersonate the client and request service tickets on the client's behalf and in the client security context for any service. If the App1 service account got compromised, it could request service tickets to other resources on the network, even though it was not authorized to do so. We should identify service accounts configured for unconstrained delegation and disable it where possible. Let's see how the client's TGT shows up in the service account ticket cache.